The flames licked the night sky, smoke curling upward as soldiers whispered in fear. In the heart of the inferno stood a man who defied tradition, mocked convention, and bent destiny to his will. His enemies called him the Demon King, but his followers saw him as the harbinger of a new era. His name was Oda Nobunaga, the warlord who dragged Japan from medieval chaos into the dawn of unification. Nobunaga's life was a storm, brilliant, ruthless, and unpredictable. Born a provincial lord's son, he became the terror of his rivals, a man who embraced firearms when others clung to swords, who laughed at ancient customs, and who declared that only the strong and the clever deserve to rule. His story is not one of gentle governance, but of bold gambits, betrayals, and relentless ambition. He rose higher than any before him, only to be undone by treachery at the height of his power. This is the story of the man who nearly united Japan by fire and steel, who reshaped the battlefield with innovation, and whose legacy still burns in the imagination of a nation. Oda Nobunaga was born in 1534 in Owari province, a fractured land caught in the violent wars of the Sengoku period. His family, the Oda clan, was powerful enough to control portions of the province, but constantly threatened by rivals and divided by internal strife. From the start, Nobunaga was unlike other children of his status. He was brash, wild, and defiant of tradition. He preferred playing in the streets with commoners over sitting quietly in formal lessons. He wore strange clothes, carried himself with arrogance, and shocked his elders with his lack of restraint. Because of his eccentric behavior, he earned the nickname Owari no Outsuke, the Fool of Owari. Few could imagine that this fool would one day terrify all of Japan. In 1551, when Nobunaga was still a teenager, his father Oda Nobuhide died, leaving the young man to inherit leadership of the clan. The transition was anything but smooth. His unconventional ways alienated his retainers, and many doubted his ability to rule. At his father's funeral, he committed what was considered a shocking insult. Instead of performing the solemn rituals expected of a new lord, he threw incense at the altar, an act of brazen disrespect. To many, it seemed proof that the Fool of Owari was unfit for leadership. Yet Nobunaga had a mind as sharp as his blade. While his rivals plotted against him, he consolidated power, instilled discipline, and slowly bent the fractious Oda clan to his will. Despite his rebellious streak, Nobunaga was not reckless when it came to securing alliances. He married Nohaime, the daughter of the powerful Saito Dosan of Mino province, in a political union that stabilized Owari's borders. Though theirs was not a marriage of affection, it gave Nobunaga valuable security at a time when enemies encircled him. The match also demonstrated his pragmatism. Nobunaga cared little for tradition or sentimentality. Everything was weighed against its value in his ruthless quest for survival and expansion. Nobunaga's true rise began in 1560, when the formidable Imagawa Yoshimoto, lord of Suruga, marched with a massive army of nearly 25,000 men toward Kyoto, seeking to dominate Japan. Nobunaga, with barely 2,000 soldiers, faced annihilation. But instead of retreating, Nobunaga launched a daring gamble. He allowed Yoshimoto's forces to grow complacent, celebrating in camp after early successes. Then, during a sudden thunderstorm, Nobunaga led a surprise attack. His men stormed into Yoshimoto's camp, cutting down soldiers in chaos. Yoshimoto himself was killed, his army routed. The victory at Okehazama stunned Japan. Nobunaga, the so-called fool, had destroyed a vastly superior force through cunning, speed, and audacity. Overnight, he became a name feared and respected across the land. With Yoshimoto gone, Nobunaga expanded rapidly. He crushed rival clans in Owari, strengthened his alliances, and pushed his borders outward. He took advantage of the turmoil left by Yoshimoto's death, seizing territory and drawing powerful warriors to his cause. His use of firearms, relatively new to Japan after Portuguese traders introduced them in 1543, gave him a distinct edge. While other warlords treated guns as novelties, Nobunaga recognized their potential. He armed his troops with arquebuses and drilled them in coordinated volleys, transforming battlefield tactics. Nobunaga was not just a warrior, he was an innovator. He tore down old castles and built new fortresses like Azuchi Castle, designed not only for defense, but as symbols of authority and wealth. One of Nobunaga's most important relationships was with Tokugawa Ieyasu, the future shogun of Japan. After the fall of the Imagawa, Ieyasu aligned with Nobunaga, and the two men became steadfast allies. While Nobunaga's ambition burned bright, Ieyasu's patience ran deep. Together, they formed a partnership that reshaped central Japan. Though their personalities were different, one impulsive, the other cautious, their goals aligned, and their cooperation proved decisive in many campaigns. By 1568, Nobunaga was powerful enough to influence the imperial court. He marched into Kyoto, installing Ashikaga Yoshiaki as shogun. Though Yoshiaki quickly became little more than a puppet, Nobunaga, through sheer force of will, had taken control of the capital, marking a turning point in his quest for dominance. Yet his audacity made him enemies. Traditionalists despised him for his contempt of court rituals. Rivals feared his growing power. And Buddhist institutions, especially the militant monks of Mount Hiei and the Ikko sect, became his sworn enemies. In 1571, Nobunaga launched one of his most infamous campaigns. The warrior monks of Mount Hiei, near Kyoto, had resisted his rule and allied with his enemies. In response, Nobunaga ordered his army to attack the great monastery complex. The assault was merciless. Temples burned, monks and civilians alike were slaughtered. The destruction of Mount Hiei shocked Japan, cementing Nobunaga's reputation as ruthless and uncompromising. To some, he was a monster who desecrated sacred grounds. To others, he was a visionary who tore down outdated powers that hindered unification. In 1575, Nobunaga faced one of his greatest tests against Takeda Katsuyori, heir to the famed Takeda Shingen. The Takeda cavalry was legendary, feared across Japan for its devastating charges. At Nagashino, Nobunaga unleashed the full potential of firearms. He deployed 3,000 arquebusiers behind wooden palisades, organizing them into rotating ranks that fired in volleys. When the Takeda cavalry charged, they were cut down in waves of gunfire. The victory shattered the Takeda clan and revolutionized Japanese warfare. Nobunaga proved that strategy and innovation could overcome tradition, and firearms became central to battle tactics. As Nobunaga's power grew, so did his reputation. His enemies branded him Oda Nobunaga, the demon king of the sixth heaven, a title meant as an insult, but one he embraced with pride. He was seen as a man who defied the old gods and traditions, who pursued power with an almost supernatural intensity. He delighted in shocking those around him. He wore strange clothes, entertained foreign missionaries, and mocked rigid customs. He welcomed Western firearms, trade, and even Christianity, seeing them as tools for power rather than threats. By the 1580s, Nobunaga controlled vast swaths of central Japan. He subdued the Ikoeki uprisings, defeated rival clans, and continued building his power base. His castle at Azuchi stood as a symbol of his authority, towering over Lake Biwa as both fortress and palace. He dreamed not just of ruling Japan, but of transforming it. He encouraged trade, welcomed artisans, and envisioned a nation free of the endless wars that had plagued it for generations. Yet his ambition was matched only by his ruthlessness. He tolerated no dissent and crushed opposition with merciless efficiency. Nobunaga's meteoric rise ended as suddenly as it began. In 1582, while campaigning in western Japan, he stopped at the temple of Honno-ji in Kyoto with only a small retinue. His general, Akechi Mitsuhide, long resentful and harboring grievances, betrayed him. Mitsuhide's forces surrounded Honno-ji, launching a surprise attack. Nobunaga, caught off guard, fought desperately but realized escape was impossible. Rather than be captured, he chose death. Setting the temple ablaze, he committed seppuku, ending his life in flames. His death, sent shockwaves across Japan. The man who had come closer than anyone to unifying the nation was gone, undone not by rival lords, but by the betrayal of a trusted vassal. Though Nobunaga's life ended in tragedy, his legacy endured. His work laid the foundation for unification. His ally Tokugawa Ieyasu and his successor Toyotomi Hideyoshi completed what he began. But it was Nobunaga who shattered the old order. He transformed warfare, embraced innovation, and dragged Japan into a new age. To this day, he remains one of Japan's most fascinating figures, admired for his vision, feared for his cruelty, and remembered as the warlord who dared to remake a nation. Facts about Oda Nobunaga. His childhood name was Kipposhi. Nobunaga loved tea ceremonies and supported the famous tea master Sen no Rikyu. He was fascinated by foreign culture, often wearing European clothing. Nobunaga was one of the first Japanese warlords to use firearms on a massive scale. His castle at Azuchi was one of the most lavish structures of its time. He often shocked guests by serving exotic foods, including delicacies brought by Europeans. Nobunaga was unusually tall for his era, standing around 5'8". He tolerated Christianity, seeing missionaries as useful allies against Buddhist institutions. He was nicknamed the Fool of Owari in his youth. Despite his fearsome reputation, he had a sharp sense of humor and loved practical jokes. Oda Nobunaga's life was a whirlwind, brilliant, ruthless, and unfinished. He rose from a provincial lord mocked as a fool to a warlord who redefined warfare and nearly unified Japan. His embrace of innovation, his defiance of tradition, and his merciless ambition carved his name into history as one of the most extraordinary figures of his age. Though his story ended in fire at Honno-ji, his vision did not die with him. His successors carried forward his mission, and his influence endures in Japanese culture, strategy, and identity. Nobunaga remains a symbol of daring ambition, a man who refused to accept the world as it was, and instead tried to shape it to his will. He reminds us that greatness often comes not from conformity, but from the courage to defy expectations, to embrace change, and to pursue a vision no matter the cost. Nobunaga lived like a storm, and though storms pass, their mark remains forever.